will just kind of try them, will not just break fun of it. So that was great. Thank you. So Crystal Campbell, so it's Rich and Brian and Aaron and Lauren, so the four of them. And then Austin, then if anybody. Yes,
Way more than I do.
I've read so
Did you teach Kate now? To Bill Kate.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First, we have some business to do. We're going to start with that. I'd like a motion to approve personnel actions. Mr. Bondell?
I move to approve personal actions as recommended by the superintendent.
Thank you. And a second, Mrs. Nordalillo. Any questions or comments? Mr. Core, do you have any comments?
Yes. Ms. Bongermino has two new members of her office staff, and I would like to have her introduce them this evening.
Thank you. We have with us today Kate Scheller and Sarah Sherwin. Kate comes to us from GE, where she's done a lot of work working with retirees and pensions, and she holds a master's degree and is also a Shaker grad. And Sarah is a current North Colony employee working in our transportation department and has worked at Stewart before that and has brought her entire family here to celebrate with us. And so, again, also another Shaker grad. So we're very excited to have them join the team, and I think you're going to see some great stuff coming out of the retail department.
Congratulations.
I have my dad, Rob Oakley. He actually works in transportation as well. And my mom, Mary, she works at the high school. And I'm an assistant. And I have my daughter, Layla, and my son, Samuel. They go to Forest Ferry.
They work in the summer and we can do something.
And my husband, Matt.
It's
A
real Shaker family, a North Colony family. Oh my goodness. Well, we're very happy to have you here with us and in the HR department. And we're very happy also that you brought your family. We always like to see families at these events. And so thank you very much. And actually, you might want to go out to celebrate and avoid our business meeting and our budget meeting. If you'd like to stay, you're welcome. But I know you have small children here with you tonight. So if you'd like to leave, you may.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
I thought we voted, but just in case we didn't vote, let's vote again. All in favor? All right, thank you very much.
Fun stuff happens. You ever heard about grounds and maintenance?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, next I'd like a motion to approve a revised agreement with SUNY Albany. Mrs. Nardilillo?
I move to approve the revised agreement with SUNY of New York, State University of New York at Albany, for the special education internship program as recommended by the Assistant Superintendent of Education.
Thank you. And a second, Mrs. Pangburn, any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you. I'd like a motion to approve a resolution involving a environmental quality review. Mrs. D'Orazio?
I move to approve the resolution pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act relating to the 2018-19 transfer to capital project in the North Colony Central School District as recommended by the Assistant Superintendent for Business.
Thank you. In a second, Mr. Chavo, any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you. I'd like a motion to approve a resolution regarding amendment to an agreement. Ms. Sadiani?
I move to approve the resolution regarding the amendment to the agreement dated March 5th, 2019 between SM Galvin LLC and North Colony School District as recommended by the Superintendent of Business.
Thank you. In a second, Mr. Chavo, any questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you. I'd like a motion to enter into an open session of the Budget Committee Mrs. Nardolillo?
I move to enter into an open section of the budget.
And thank you. And a second, Mr. Vondell. All in favor? Thank you very much. And we're in budget right now, and I would like to thank you all for being with us tonight. First, I would like to introduce our budget co-chairs, Mrs. Mary Nardolillo and Mr. Ron Vondell. And Mr. Kaur, would you like to begin?
Yes, I'd love to. Okay, so tonight we're looking at important components of our school operations, maintenance, custodial, transportation, debt service, and interfund transfers. And as we look at our mission here, we are all working in service and support of our mission statement. And that is when we look at number one, how do we serve our students and provide them the best opportunities for an education that contributes to their academic and social growth and development. And the work of all these departments, plus the way we manage debt and use our bond money, use our capital project money to improve our facilities and to benefit our students in the long run, are exceedingly important parts of what we do. How we keep our buildings clean on a daily basis, how we keep our buildings well maintained, how we do all this important work, how we continue with our building project during these times are extremely integral to what we do. So as we look at tonight's agenda, we will be, when the departments come forward, we will be looking at an overview of the various departments. We're going to be starting with transportation, moving next to maintenance and equipment. Moving next, Mr. Hoot will do custodial equipment, as Mr. Wiegert, our Director of Custodial Services, is not with us this evening. Maintenance projects, Mr. Kraft, our Director of Facilities, will speak to that. Mr. Myers will be speaking to transportation. And then Mr. Hoot will talk about debt service and interfund transfers, specifically with our transfer to capital fund and our transfer to special aid fund. We'll talk about some of our current thinking on that. I'd also like to call your attention on Thursday night. We're going to be coming back in. We're going to be following up on one of the initiatives that we had in last year's budget. And we will be talking about, we will have our high school administration with us, as well as our school resource officer, Officer Tony Sidoti from the County Police Department, to talk about the SRO program that we implemented this year. So I think without any further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Myers, who will speak to us about the Transportation Department and what's we're anticipating for this year. John, I have the clicker right here by Mrs. Harrison's gavel, in case you were wondering.
Good evening, everybody. I'm in the way. I'll stand here.
Would you like me to move out of your way?
No, that's okay. When I fall over, you'll be
I'll
ready to
transport myself over
Transport.
here. Keeping
just as some general stats on our department, we're doing about 870,000 miles, 5,400 kids, a little higher than last year, or it's just back to 17-18, currently 54-59. More special needs students on buses. Less non-public school students, which has kind of been a trend. Several years ago, we were over 500, and it's steadily been dropping. And now we're close to 400 for non-public school students.
John, I think, also, can you inform the public also about what our statewide obligation is for transporting non-public schools?
If you reside within the district and you get your request into a non-public school by April 1st, we'll transport anybody within 15 miles from their driveway to the school of their choice. So even though the numbers have gone down, we're still going to 32 schools, which is about what we've had. And a lot of these are one student, two students. Our biggest schools are St. Pius. We still have over 100 kids, and Albany Academy and Holy Names. And those are the three biggest ones. The rest of them are all ones and twos. And so we try to combine kids as much as we can. We do a big transfer at St. Pius Church every morning, where 11 schools come together from all over the district, and then we transfer to buses that then go out to LaSalle, Holy Names, Anur Islamic School, Academy, etc. So they all go out from there.
And you have collaborated, what you can talk about some of our collaborations that we've done to realize some efficiencies in transporting, as well as in some of our purchasing as well.
We work with South Colony on a couple of things. They very nicely go to Holy Names in the afternoon and bring our girls back and meet us at St. Gregory's. And they also go to Catholic High and bring our kids back with their kids to St. Gregory's. That saves us 2 buses. And we bring their kids from LaSalle to St. Pius in the afternoon and transfer from there. So we help each other out, because why have 2 buses going back to the same spot when we can help each other out? So, and we also help them with a St. Mary's student in Waterford that we pick up and meet them at St. Ambrose, because they're going to St. Ambrose. It saves them going into Waterford. So these are big helps. There's a lot of cost savings involved, because driver, bus, time, etc. would be something that it adds up quick. So that's been happening for several years, and it's a big money saver for the district. Helps both of us. Bus drivers, we always have been struggling to find qualified people to be bus drivers. We've been pretty lucky generally, because word of mouth. Our only advertising usually is the things you see out in front of the elementary schools and high school, bus drivers needed, and that's how people come to us. And half the time it's like, well, I went to school with that guy, and I know this guy, and he's my neighbor, so that we get quality people that way. We continue to struggle, but we still have been able to get them in. This number, 78, 19 substitutes, is actually down, and this may seem like a high number of 19 people. That's great, but it's PM only for some people. Some of them are snowbirds. They leave us in October. They come back in March. Some people own AM only, sometimes PM only. So they're on the books, and we take them when they're available, but it's not 19 people every day. It's hit or miss. And without getting into the demographics of who our drivers are, sometimes we work with 12 to 15% absenteeism every day, and a few long-term disability, et cetera, medical things. So substitutes are a very key element to what we do, especially with the sports trips and stuff in the afternoon, because they occur during the afternoon runs. So they're very much needed. 21 bus aides for our students with special needs. 14 of them are full-time, 7 substitutes. That number increased by 3 people this year due to the increasing enrollment. Increasing enrollment means more kids coming in proportionally with special needs, and we had to create 2 special needs bus routes this year, new, and incorporate part of one to a driver that didn't have one initially and now does. And then from here down, this is pretty much the same as it's been for several years. 7 mechanics, a head mechanic, our me, director, assistant director, Claudine Beck, who's in the back there tonight. And our people transportation analyst, which was Sarah, but not anymore. But I wish her well. We wish her well, of course. And our dispatcher, Amanda Cutter. So that is this one. The state fiscal year. This was a slide from the last couple of years. We've had an excellent run of our DOT. We've had 100% for several years running. The fiscal year ends March 31st, and we have 2 more inspections to go. So it's the bottom of the 9th, and there's 2 outs. We're not going to say any more after that. So bad luck, as they say. Bus replacement schedule: 6 to 8 buses a year. That's based on our the number of total buses, 11-year lifespan, 10.8 to be exact overall. And so we've been buying 6 to 8 per year. Last year we bought 8 buses at a cost of $976,000. This year I'm actually going to 9, and part of that I'll show you on the next slide for $1,094,000. There we go. So it's 7 buses and 2 new ones, and the 2 new ones be 2 30-passenger buses. They look like regular school buses, they're just shorter. One of the things about the increasing enrollment and our non-public schools and our students displaced and everything else is that because we moved some buses into special needs, we ended up being in a situation where we have private school runs with only a few kids, but we ran out of small buses. We have to use big buses, and that takes 2 big buses away from athletics as spare buses or sub buses when buses are in for service. So I've got 2 new small buses on the budget for this year to add to the fleet. And these are 2 Ford buses. They're like the smaller minibus, and we've been moving to the larger 26-passenger, 18 adult. It's got 2 wheelchair stations, but it's a flexible floor plan, goes up to 4. And like this year, we've got a couple of bus runs where we do have at times 3 students who use wheelchairs on the bus at one time. So these are very, very flexible for us because they can take more kids if we need them, but they can also take more students with special needs if we need them as well.
All those buses are lift equipped, correct, John?
Correct, lift equipped, air conditioning, so they can have more seats if you need more seats, take some seats out if you need that too. I'm gonna go the right direction at least one time.
John, could you just comment too a bit on we've improved in recent years. We've improved the value we get on resale with some of our used buses
We have.
put on out for bid.
Because of the excellent care that we how we take care of our buses, they reach the end of their lifespan in the terms of that for our use, and that the cost of maintaining keeps going up and up and up, and eventually, it becomes time to replace them. However, instead of the old days, years ago, we used to just trade them in to the dealer, and you wouldn't get very much. The average price was like $1,500 or $2,000 if you were lucky. We put them out to govdeals.com for auction, and we've been averaging $7,000-8,000 a bus, which is really good. So that, and when you're selling 7 buses, that's a nice give back to the district. So that's.
It may not seem like that, when you compare, but given.
Well, it's like 5 times more than we
5
got
times
before,
more
so,
what
yeah.
we were getting.
Yeah. For our equipment this year, just the only thing that we're looking to purchase are 2 72,000 wireless mobile column lifts. And what they are is basically what you see here is that you slide them up to the wheel of the bus, each wheel, and they communicate wirelessly, and it picks the bus up and you work underneath it. The good thing being you can move them from bay to bay if you have to, but you can also just slide them to whatever size bus you have, and there's also adapters for different size buses, small buses, big buses, doesn't matter. The really good thing about this is that, first of all, there's no cables on the floor, but these things, you plug them in on Friday night and you unplug them Monday morning when you come in, and they're good for the week because they're battery operated, no cables. The one set we're looking to replace, one is new and one's a replacement. The one we're replacing is the old 3-phase, 408 volts, takes a lot of power, and it just, we don't have that much power to spare in our building. Our building has got power coming in from everywhere. I think there's an extension cord running from a house to so we make do with what we have. And so this would be a big savings in power as well, and just the fact that we literally don't need the power all week long, and then we charge during this weekend when the rates are low as well.
So how do you know when we're running out of power?
It'll tell you.
Exactly.
Boy, that bus is taking a long time to get up there. Yeah. Hey.
And before you go, I think we routinely comment on the DOT safety record. And so I think, can you put that in perspective, that 100% in terms of what it really means, that it is really a phenomenal, it's a rarity for an entity of our size to score consistently that well.
It is. I mean, we have 78 vehicles, and so you're looking to inspections every 6 months. So you're talking about 150 to 165, depending on how they fall on the calendar. It could be as high as 170 inspections a year. So you have 170 opportunities for, if one of the red lights doesn't work, it's a failure. If a seatbelt doesn't work, it's a failure. There's so many levels, so many ways to fail. And because we have, our mechanics their attention to detail and making sure they pass is so great that they take a lot of pride in that. And they want to make sure that they get that. And so being in the 90s is actually is what most districts around here get. I mean, public school districts and even the private contractors really try to stay, anything above 90, they're happy, 90%. And 95%, they're still happy. But 100% is unusual. And we got it once or twice, it's like, wow, that's great. But we're going on 6 times, 7 times. So that's a pretty phenomenal achievement. And part of it is due to the fact that the relationship that we forged with our DOT inspectors is that they really know and trust that we're doing what we're supposed to do. They know we're not cutting corners. They know we're not trying to get something by them. We've pointed stuff out to them. Say, well, what about this? And they're like, oh, thank you. And they'll work with us on stuff because they know we're serious about it. So yeah, it is an unusual accomplishment for ourselves.
And one more thing too, I think if you could also comment on the level and the extent of the mechanical work and the body work that our staff does, because I think we do so much in-house and really have to contract out not so much?
We do just about everything. I mean, big budget or big engine teardowns, that takes up a lot of space. We may not do that, but that doesn't happen very often. But we do our own body work, and because what happens with the salt and everything else, especially in the back end of a bus, the back wheel wells, the back doors, that's where a lot of the rust will form. And after about 7 or 8 years, there's no way around it to pass DOT, because if they see rust or any place where there might be a hole, the bus will fail. So you can't just bondo anything. You have to replace it and fix it before it's ever inspected. But we have a paint shop, so we bring the bus in there, take it apart, and rebuild the panels on it and put it back together again, and then it's in pretty good shape for a few more years. But it's again quality work that we don't have to ship out, because that would be not only would be very, very expensive, it also you lose the bus for 6 or 8 weeks, and we can get it done in 3 or 2.
Mrs. Harris?
This doesn't speak to the confidence that our families have in the transportation department, because frequently throughout the year we get letters of commendation for our bus drivers, commenting on their professionalism, commenting on their kindness, and the photograph of the children thanking the bus driver, for keeping them safe. I believe parents have a lot of confidence when they put that child on the bus that they'll be well cared for, and I think that is extremely important for everyone to hear. And you should take that message back to the 78 bus drivers.
78 plus 19, so
Yeah.
so there's a lot of people.
Yeah, right. They do a great job, and I know in my neighborhood it's great confidence in the bus driver.
Very good. Thank you.
So going forward, we're thinking we're probably gonna need a couple more buses. Are we holding on to some a little longer to kind of fill that gap? Or how are we gonna deal with that?
Well, for the last few years, I've held on to one bus. I don't have that plan for this coming year because I'm getting the 2 new ones already, the 2 smaller ones, hopefully. But I've been holding on to one bus, so if we buy 8, I was retiring 7, so one would stay on, and then that one would go the following year. So I have been kind of doing that. The fleet was, I think a few years ago, 75, 74, and it's kind of crept up a little bit. Now we're at 78, depending on what we do. Enrollment has been a factor. That's why the 2 new small ones I'm asking for are there. But again, with enrollment going up, you reach tipping points too. So when we talk about, not so much next year, but the year after, when we're talking about this, the 6th graders going to the middle school, we're still having conversations about how that's all going to work out too. So that's another conversation. But yes, I mean, I'm trying to, if need be, we can. But like these particular 3 of the big buses, my head mechanic, the fleet supervisor, was kind of like, we could hold on to them, but I would like to see them go. I mean, and he doesn't always say that, but these guys have really, we put some work into them, but it would be nice to let those go. So we don't have any real savers for this year. Yeah, but we can. You're right.
John, what about the transportation software? I know in the last few years we've had some software changeovers.
We for years and years we were always Versatrans, which was based in Albany, actually Latham, and then we switched 3 years ago. We switched to TransFinder, and their headquarters are in Schenectady, which is funny because they're the 2 main software in the country. One's in Latham, one's in Schenectady, so it's pretty easy for support. If they don't answer, we can just go there. But yes, we use TransFinder, which is more of a Windows-based, like it's more Windows friendly, I should say.
And that's working out well.
Yeah. It's very good for data capture. It's like you can just lasso an area and it tells you everybody that's there like that, and it's pretty handy. So we can gather information very quickly.
Okay. Thank you.
Does the board have any other questions? So we'll open it up to the community. Are there any questions from Mr. Meyer? Sam?
You mentioned that the private school, number of private school students we transport is going down. Do we know why? I don't care about why so much as I care about, can we rely on that trend continuing, or are we just getting lucky right now for a couple of years?
I don't necessarily have an answer because I'm not, sometimes when you send your child to academy, you still have to register with the district. So the district has you on the rolls. So we've got people on the rolls, but they aren't necessarily using the buses. Now, some people might be, if they don't have to be at school till 8 and we're picking them up at 6:45, they may not be thrilled with that, so that's part of it. But I don't know if the actual numbers, enrollment numbers, are lower as opposed to people using the buses. But it has significantly gone down. St. Pius's numbers are way down. And I think there was a big jump when we went full day K. And that happened. St. Ambrose took a hit, St. Pius took a hit, and I think any place that had a kindergarten, full day kindergarten, private school, saw their numbers decrease too. So it got quick there.
I think you just answered that. I think full day K was a big driver in all that. And what would happen is that a lot of parents would start their children in full day K. They would make friends and they would want to stay in 6th grade to either 8th grade, and then they might come into district. So that was a big driver. I think also the finances of private and parochial schools have driven some people in our direction. And I think, without sounding too self-serving, I'll sound very self-serving, and I think they like North County too.
We used to send 2 full buses to Academy and 2 full buses to Holy Names when I first got here in 2001, in the first few years, and now we're down to, it's 1 bus each, and that's it.
Go ahead, Sam.
And then do we break out the cost of, I don't know what the term before it would be, like the basic transportation we provide our students to and from school versus the time that the buses and drivers spend driving to athletic events and field trips and things like that?
You mean in terms of like home to school and back kind of thing versus field trips kind of thing? Or?
Well, I'm just wondering in terms of like, and this might just be my ignorance of how all of this gets allocated, but if we're keeping drivers on a longer shift because they're doing sports practice, do we account for how much extra that costs, or is it just sort of lumped in together and we get it? Like field trips, I would assume we get, except for the gas, mostly for free, right? Because the drivers and buses wouldn't otherwise be doing anything.
The way it's, traditionally, and I don't know if anyone can speak to this in the business office, is that your regular payroll is school bus transportation to and from home. And then there's budgeted amounts for field trips and athletic trips, 2 separate things.
Okay, so that's not coming out of your budget, that's coming
Well, it is for driver salary. In other words, if they do a field trip, that comes out of the field trip budget, not the regular pay. So when they do their time card, it would be,
Right.
it'd be, I did a bus run, and then at 9 o'clock I did a field trip to Proctor's.
But we're still putting the miles on the buses are coming out of
Yes.
the same.
But it's not, the vast majority is school to home. We don't do, we do a fair amount of athletics. That's just, like the suburban council, but we don't do, it doesn't seem more than anybody else. It just seems like you do, when the sports are a lot, you do like 5 or 6 trips a day, and when things back off, like right now, it's still pretty light, so we only do 1 or 2. So you go through like a busy and then not so busy.
What is the range we can transport kids on the bus to?
We go up to 100 miles one way. So we go as far as like Utica. Where's Max? 99.9 miles away, something like that. But we do no more than 100 miles, and then because it's a school bus, and it's if you really hate your kids and you put them on the bus for that long, that's you can do that. But it's beyond that, then they would need to rent a coach or charter bus or something.
Are there any other questions?
And just one more thing too. You also might, when we do contract with a private vendor like a Yankee Trails or a Brown Bus, they undergo a mandatory state inspection by our personnel here.
We have pre-approved vendors, so we only have about 5 people that we can use for outside work, outside charter bus stuff, and they're people that have an exemplary safety record. They have to be the minimum 90% for DOT, and we can't use anybody else. So when somebody says, I got a Brown coach bus coming to take kids to New York City, they have to stop by the garage first and get an inspection by a mechanic. And it's not, we don't go put it on a lift or anything, but it's tires, lights, driver's license. We know ahead of time who the driver is. We can check their license, make sure that it's clean. And so they do get inspected before they transport our kids.
And you have sent them back.
Yes, we have. If a bus shows up and then like the ball tire is like, well, you can't go, so they have to hustle and they get another bus. And years and years ago, somebody showed up with a bus that wasn't on the list, and that turned into a big to-do. But that was about 16 years ago. So.
Well, I can say as a parent that we're very appreciative. It's very consistent. Been on the route for at least 4 years over in brighten your Loudonville. It's been a very consistent process, so which is not easy to do. I know
Right.
for you guys,
Yeah.
but we appreciate that as parents for sure, and the safety for sure is really appreciated.
Can I make a pitch for bus driver?
Sure.
One of the reasons we have consistency is that we get people in. The hardest part about getting new bus drivers is getting them in the door. But once they get there, they usually love it because they find out that, especially if they're retirees or they've had a full career, I've had several drivers, say like, this is a country club. Everybody's friendly. The work, I drive for a couple hours, I go home, I come back later. I love the kids. I mean, the kids are great, and they always have been. And whenever you hear like kids today, different. I mean, they have more accessories, but other than that, they're just kids, and they're really well behaved. And people like worry about that. But once we get them on the hook, they love it and they don't leave. So, spread the word. We're always hiring.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think I did it right even one time.
We're now going to do an overview of the maintenance department, and Mr. Brian Kraft, our Director of Facilities, will present to us.
Hello, everybody. This is my first budget presentation.
Welcome.
There's some running bets in the back about whether I'll tank or not. They don't have a lot of faith, I tell you.
It's a tough audience.
Yes, it
It
is.
is a tough crowd.
Tough audience.
It is. So the good news about that is that in 2 weeks it'll be my 1 year anniversary as well. So for that, okay? Thank you. And it's been a nice move coming to East Greenbush and getting to know the departments, and hopefully I can do.
And Brian, you came to us from East Greenbush.
Correct. Yes.
And prior to that, you were at the University of Albany.
Correct. Yes.
All right, so you have a lot of experience in that.
Yep. Now Keith says I can swipe up or down, left or right. Left and right.
Wait a minute.
The other way.
Other way.
Right to left. Okay, there you go.
We give you one toy at a time.
And you still would have gone backwards.
Very good. So this is just the overview of our department. I'm sure you've seen that. It's my position, Director of Facilities, Assistant Director of Facilities, which is Alan Levitas, clerical support, and then we have a total of 17 maintenance workers in the department, 3 of which are full-time grounds workers, and then we hired 2 seasonal help for the grounds department in the summer, so we helped them out a little bit. And then we have 1 building system technician, which is Eddie, and he's probably going to go be living with his granddaughter soon, I think, out west. But just quick on Alan, we purchased a preventive maintenance program last year, and the company that sells that does that all over the nation. And Alan implemented the preventive maintenance program properly in the computer, and we just saw the salesman at a conference the other day, and he said we're the first school that ever did that without actually having to pay them to help us. So, yes. And I couldn't do it at East Greenbush, so it's a nice job by him. So, overall, we're a large school district, which is nice. We have 13 locations with just a little bit over 1 million square feet. Means lots of equipment, boilers, air conditioners, heating and cooling roof units, over 3,000 doors, 4,000 plumbing fixtures, 15,000 light bulbs, and over 30,000 electrical fixtures and components. So there's quite a bit out there to be working on and fixing. We have 284 acres of property, 8 playgrounds, 20 parking lots, and 21 practice and play fields, and over 5 miles of fencing to maintain. So definitely enough to do. There we go. This is just an overview of our equipment. We have approximately 20 vehicles, pickup trucks that we use for plowing, dump trucks, vans. The painters use the vans primarily. We have 12 plows total, so we can get the school open on time. And just the note, that's gone very well this year. So the guys have that down, they do it, it gets taken care of, there's no issues. So That's nice. There are school districts where people don't show up to plow, so. We got 6 equipment trailers, 3 tractors, 2 backhoes, and a lot of specialized equipment for the grounds department to deal with the stuff they gotta deal with for athletics and the playgrounds and stuff. Okay, so this year, we're requesting 2 vehicles. Basically, these are our 2 primary style vehicles that we have. It's an F-350 with a plow and utility body, and they're about $70,000 each once you get everything put together with them. I think on the neck, and then we're also requesting $25,000 for rooftop equipment replacements, which we would do in-house. So we could buy them on state contract, purchase them, run a crane and get them up there, and they're pretty easy switch outs, and our guys can do it in, for about a third of the cost. So that's something.
And Brian, I think, that's an important point too. If you just, I know this was not anticipated, but if you just comment on, we talked about our mechanics, about the capacity of your staff here to do a lot of the work internally that, again, in many places would be contracted out. So, I think a good example was our construction project last year in the physical education facility over at the high school, which was overwhelmingly, I'd say 95% was done by our internal crew here. Can you just comment on the skill set you have here?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing they can't do. We have locksmith, we have carpenters they're what I call fine carpenters. They just don't nail 2x4s together. We have electricians. We have 2 electricians who, there's an issue in the building, they can fix it or know how to fix it. We have staff that does mechanical work, plumbing work, and very well. We have Scott Carpenter. He's an HVAC technician, basically, and you just don't have that in other districts. To have that, you end up paying for in service contracts and service calls and stuff like that. So, something like the rooftop unit, we can buy a rooftop unit for maybe like $5,000. I was paying $16,000 to get something like that installed at East Greenbush. So the labor and everything else that you can save is quite substantial. So it's nice.
And I think a great example is this room right here.
Yes.
If you're, I don't know if you've been around a long time, this was Catholic gymatorium, and it looked pretty rough, but the construction you see here, except for some of the ductwork that is up in the ceiling up there, was done entirely by our staff. So we were in, it really reduces the costs of a lot of our work by about 2/3. So again, I think it's no small feat when it comes to the work that is accomplished by the department. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next slide just shows our plan out for vehicles over the next 4 or 5 years. I was going to put mileage up there. That doesn't work out well. Our vehicles don't die because of mileage, because we stay within the district and we're working in the buildings. We're not just driving them around. They die from old age. They rust, and depending on what they're doing, they wear out. So like the one is a 2004 that we're trying to replace this year. It had 67,000 miles on that, so we won't mention that any further. But we do this with the mechanics at transportation. It's, our guys say, I'm having trouble with the vehicle, stands over there, we have a back and forth discussion, and he'll say, this is your worst vehicle. This is, we're gonna put 5,000, 10,000 into this the next couple of years, so take care of this one if you can. So that's how we come up with the request. Now backwards. Okay. Keith? Oh. Okay. This is I wasn't ready for this slide, sorry about that. This is the same type of spreadsheet with all our grounds equipment. Just looking at a couple years out, replacing different equipment and how we're gonna replace it. This is from 1998. The Steiner mower is actually being replaced by a little, if we get it to, would be replaced by a little more expensive Ventrac vehicle, but it does way more. It does what 2 or 3 vehicles do, so that's why we do that. And as you can see, there actually isn't a request for equipment this year for grounds. That's one of the reasons why is with the capital project, we received 2 new pieces of equipment for the artificial turf, so we're very happy with that. And we had got a couple pieces replaced last year, so we don't really have a need to purchase any this year. Good. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I gotta wait for questions.
They said I did a good job.
Good job.
Sorry.
They were right.
Does the
You
board-
did do a good job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have any questions for Brian?
I just have,
Yes.
where are those HVAC rooftop?
So they're all over the district. My plan is to concentrate at the high school. We definitely have some old units up there that can be replaced. And so we start there, attack that, and then venture out as we keep going, hopefully each year with that type of plan. Which I like to do for 2 reasons. Is saving the money of doing it, but then it's also not replacing everything in 1 year. So, if you buy a new house, everything is new, and then it all seems to die within a year or 2. So you gotta get programming it out. It works well in the future for planning as well. You don't have to replace 20 at a time.
Dave?
Are you holding the purchase of standby generators for the construction project to be complete, or where are we with that?
As far as
putting them in all the elementary?
So that will be included in this summer in the transfer work, assuming it's all approved, which it should be on time. It was supposed to be included in the transfer work last year. SED has trouble approving engineering type projects, and that's required. So last year, the only transfer work we got done was just architectural type stuff. So we had to hold that. So there's at least 2 more going in next year. Yeah.
So when we speak of work being that transfer work done, that was work that was approved in a previous budget. So I think that particular transfer goes back to budget year 17-18.
Correct.
So the voters authorized that we go through a state ad approval process, which takes a long time. So that work that was voted on and approved back in May of 2017 most likely will come to fruition in 2019, the rest of it.
Do we have other projects that are on that list, Joe?
Yeah, we do, and I think you're going to speak to some. Well, we're not as part of this year's budget. We're not doing any transfer as part of this, but there are projects that were approved previously that will be rolling forward.
Yeah, there's a sign at Forts Ferry. There's an abatement at Latham Ridge that actually preps it for the bigger project. So there's 5-6 things that we had to wait on.
Does the community have any questions for Brian?
Question. The Latham Ridge teachers asked the PTA for fans for their classrooms are too loud.
Yeah.
Is one of those units for Latham Ridge?
No. They shouldn't have to request fans from the PTA though. We do put
They got approved and they're buying them.
Okay.
It typically happens.
Do they? Oh. Well, maybe I should stop buying them. Because we bought fans. When we get a request for a room that's hot, we'll buy a fan from Granger. We'll stick it in and help them out with that, so.
Again, I think it's imperative, okay, that if there are needs in the schools, whether they're supply needs or whether they're fan needs, that they get communicated to the district and that the district will meet that need.
I'll pass it over.
Please, thank you.
There was also talk at Latham Ridge of a back hallway that gets really hot because of some windows.
That is
Are
in
there
the-
any blinds or anything?
So that is in the music area, correct? Yes, and that is one of the items that is at SCE now for that transfer work that got left off. So there's an air conditioning going back there.
Okay. I didn't know, just blinds or shades or something on the windows to help alleviate some of that.
Yeah.
We did that anywhere in the district. Just
What?
curious.
To add blinds and.
Yeah.
Well.
Is that coming up?
On a future slide, yes.
Well, I should get to that.
Yeah,
well, all right. I guess I'm ahead of things.
So that will move to the custodial department then. Okay?
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
So,
Thank you.
I think the answer to your question will be revealed in the custodial department, is what I meant to say.
Or maybe shortly thereafter.
Right.
So unfortunately, Mr. Weir couldn't be with us tonight, so I'll do my best to kind of take you through the custodial department, and maybe my friend Brian can help out with some of the details. So just as we've done with the other departments, here is the list of staff members. And I think the important takeaway here is if you look at the square feet, just over 1 million square feet, and a benchmark of about 24,000 square feet per custodial worker. Right now, we're just about 25,000 square feet, so we're right in that ballpark. And I think, arguably, if you go into any of our buildings, you will find them in very good condition. The staff doing a very nice job taking care of the buildings, which is no easy task. Now, just as we need to plan for expansion of instructional needs, we have expansion of our buildings. Therefore, we have more square feet to take care of. So we have about 100,000 square feet coming online in the middle school. In the middle school. So just doing the easy math, that's about 4 staff members that we would need to consider going forward into the 2021 school year to probably maintain that and maintain reasonable ratios. So the custodial equipment, not quite as fancy as new trucks and big lawnmowers, but the stuff that there is one particular item that you do get to ride around on inside the building, and that's a ride-on scrubber is being requested for next year. There's one currently at the high school.
Correct.
This would then be placed in the middle school.
And he's asking for that based on the expansion to the middle school, the extra square footage, and they allow you to clean more in less time with less people. So.
And while it might sound funny, it is way more efficient for that piece of equipment to get the job done.
You're going to make sure that you lock out Mr. Chamberlain from operating. If there be a code that he will not have.
Sorry.
And then the custodial department does have a few pieces of equipment they use outside with snow blowers and some small lawn mowers, and inside a carpet cleaner and a burnisher, which is that device that kind of spins around and makes the terrazzo floors look really nice. So Mr. Weger put together, just as we have in the other departments, kind of planning this out over the course of 4 years to see what the equipment needs look like. In this current year, the budget got spiked a little bit just because we were at a point in time when we really needed a new delivery van. Now we're kind of back down more into the normal range of around $30,000 per year to keep the the equipment in good condition and replace them periodically. Okay, so now we get to maintenance projects, and I'll let Brian kind of walk you through what's in store for the coming year.
Okay, so one of the things that definitely going around to the schools and just looking and hearing from the principals is our playground surfaces need to be upgraded. We need to get more wood chips in there and make it a safer environment for the kids when they're out there. Estimate is $40,000. I don't know if we'll do that all 1 year or over 2 years. It's quite a thing to do. So the big step is I'm trying to find a way to purchase them off of some sort of contract, so it's easier to purchase them and I don't have to waste time trying to purchase them. But I think our plan would be to start at Loudonville and just kind of work our way down as we go. So I think that's a nice project. Another thing is backstop replacements. Blue Creek, Loudonville, and Latham Ridge. We figured like $15,000 at that. We did one at Forts Ferry last year, and I think if we're going to try to combine them together and have purchasing help us, so we get a few more people interested. But a couple of them are a little worn out. Parking lot striping. We're looking at Bout Hills, Southgate, the bus garage in Goodrich. We're thinking $6,000 towards that, and then the window blind replacement. So this is it comes from a couple different things. Mark Riegert, myself, and Scott kind of worked together, and Mark kind of said, "Hey, we're in this safety meeting all the time, and they want to know where these room darkening blinds are for safety reasons, and then also for temperature help." So we kind of sat down, and I think Scott said $30,000 off the top of his head, and then we took a couple of days trying to figure out what it really was. And it's $30,000. So per year. So the idea is to upgrade in the junior high, middle school, ones that aren't getting replaced by the project, and then go to the high school and do that. The rest Mark did 20-something thousand there this past year, and then hopefully finish off the high school and then go through the elementary schools and I don't know if you can do all one elementary school. Some of them are in nicer shape than the junior high and high school, but we can figure that out if we do 20 in one or we do all of it. And $30,000 goes a long way towards an elementary school.
So we're looking to have a standard budget, keep it steady year in and year out, so we can have a blind replacement program in place.
Yeah, that's good too, because otherwise if you did every building, it's an astronomical amount of money. So. And then the other things we have coming up is we're ready for a building condition survey, which costs about $75,000. That one shocked me a little bit. And as part of the building condition survey, we have to do our lead water testing again. So we did that 3 years ago or so. When they passed the law, they passed it and said we're going to include this in the building condition survey. And you're going to do it every 5 years, and you're going to retest, which is a good thing. Pretty much everything is taken care of now, but just to go check it and stay on top of it, be assured that nothing's changing. That's positive. So and that costs about $30,000 to do.
So these are mandated. These are mandated by the state. Our building condition survey runs every 5 years. Last one we did was 2015, and so we'll do 2020. They will do. We will contract with an architecture engineering firm to come in and review our mechanical systems, our roofs, all major infrastructure. They will give it a rating, and then we will prioritize accordingly and seek to resolve and remediate.
Okay, Lord, are there any questions?
What is a backstop?
Oh, so it's a metal fencing behind home plate.
Okay.
So it'd be for baseball or kickball, at the elementary schools.
I'm thinking it was some paving thing.
No. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
I have heard about, and
this is secondhand, but leaking in the tactile cafeteria from the, what is it, the window, the skylights. Yeah, is
Yes,
that?
it's a continuing problem. We deal with that and from the roof from a maintenance standpoint right now. And I think you'll find that coming up in the BCS and future plans of the roofing at the high school. It's not as old as we thought, but it's from 1990, 1992, which puts it about 30 years and puts it at a time where we really got to start thinking about taking care of it. Hopefully what we're going to do is get a whole plan with all the roofs in the district and the times of when they were put in, so we can have an idea of how we're handling that and lay out a replacement.
And I also had a question about the Forts Ferry tennis courts that regularly flood
Yes.
and look terrible, and I'm wondering if there's a plan for those long term, short term.
Hopefully short term. It's kind of my pet project. I definitely noticed it when I showed up. Our goal is we talked to CS Arch and we have a plan. I think it's around $200,000 if we were to implement it. Ripping up the pavement that's there, the fencing, paving it without a drain because that's why it floods,
right.
And making it so it drains off to the sides, replacing the fencing and taking down the trees that cause all the litter on it. They are right next to the power line, so I don't want to do that ourselves. And then could do a similar thing. There was ideas from inside the school from phys ed about how they could set up stations. You could paint stations, and if we did the fencing right, you could do it similar to Loudonville when they use it for overflow parking as well, and they have events. So yes, I would like to get that done. That's
amazing.
Those tennis courts actually belong to the district? I think there's some sort of connection with the town colony and those courts.
There used to be at one time. I think they leased or rented them. But I called and checked when I first came, and they sent me all the paperwork and say they're yours.
Great, they're our problem now, okay.
Yes.
The town used
We
to,
used to have ice skating there.
the town used to maintain pocket parks
Yeah.
in schools.
That's why they flood all the time, so we could ice skate on
So we could ice skate it, yeah, so
but it doesn't really happen that way anymore.
Can I ask you a question back to the custodian? What's the difference between a cleaner and a custodian? And that may be out of your wheelhouse, but.
A cleaner is usually a lower level employee. A custodian usually has more responsibility and has a higher pay rate. So a cleaner would be just absolutely cleaning. Custodian's expected to watch after some stuff and take care of some extra stuff.
Custodian can also do more outside work too, as well.
So
Okay,
it's a
that could
difference in
include
job
snow
duties.
blowing, maintenance of grounds immediately, within a certain distance from the building.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the community?
Do you recall what the rating was for the building conditions survey in 2015?
Well, there's not one rating. Okay, what they'll do is they'll go from building to building, and they'll go system by system. And then the worst rating you can get is failure. Okay, and at that point in time, then they reserve the right to close the building and deem it unsafe. We don't have any of those, but sometimes also those ratings are very arbitrary. They're based on the age of a system. And so we may have systems that are aged, okay, but are well maintained and are functioning extremely well. And so they may get a rating of poor just based on age alone because it is arbitrary and the like. Poor does not mean that you have to immediately replace it, but it gets your attention, and certainly you want to address that over time.
I just wanted to make a comment about the custodians. My son is a senior and we've been in this district the entire time. And every building that I've ever been in, especially off hours, I think those men and women do a wonderful job. I've seen them chase after, a gum wrapper that's blowing in the wind or, and I just, from my perspective, I think, it starts with the building and the environment that the kids are learning in. And my experience has been very positive you know, as you know, I'm involved, I'm in the buildings, or I used to be, a lot in the evenings when the students weren't there, and that's when the cleaners are out a lot, or the custodians, and I just wanna say, I think they do a great job, and it's, from my perspective, I think that's a really important, but maybe overlooked job. And on the snow plowing, I do have a senior that drives to school. And one morning it was snowing, and I said, so, you know, everything go okay getting to school? Well, yeah, but my parking spot, I couldn't see the lines. Like, well, honey, it was snowing. So, you know, I just, from his perspective, he couldn't see the lines, he had to back in and, you know, shuffle with his sneaker to, he wanted to make sure he was in the line. He knew Mr. Murphy would be out there, and he wasn't. So, you know, he'd be getting or I'd be getting a call that my kid wasn't parked in the lines, but other than that, you know, I know that they do a great job clearing, even if there's a delay, you know, I think it's important because you have those inexperienced drivers coming around, and to have the lots cleared, I think it's really important, and I think they do a great job there too.
Good, thank you.
I believe there are no other questions.
Okay.
Ryan?
All right. We'll transition to debt service.
Yeah, something interesting.
So we have three instruments out there, and you see the various dates that they were issued, 97, 2001, and 2008. Those are the three outstanding bond issues. So the first one falls off 21-22, the middle one 22-23, and the third one next year in 19-20. And you see essentially until this one for about $400,000 falls off, about the same amount each year, fairly level debt service. Now down at the bottom, we started to add in financing for the $106 million project. And the way you start to finance that initially is through bond anticipation notes. So those are short-term, one-year borrowing instruments. So the first one we took out was $53 million this past July. That will come due July of 19. So that first payment in this 19-20 column will have an interest payment of a little better than $1.5 million. And we'll make a principal payment of $750,000 for a little better than $2.3 million in total. Why did we borrow $53 million? Because that's the cash flow we needed in order to pay the contractors on the project. So we do an estimate of what cash is going to be needed during that 12-month period based on the construction schedule, and came up with that $53 million. You don't want to borrow more than what you need. You don't want to pay interest on money that you don't need. So that'll come due in July. So in preparation for the next borrowing cycle, another bond anticipation note, which is slated to be at $80 million based on our cash needs over that next year. These are only estimates. Once we go out another year into 2021, the fiscal advisors are estimating an interest rate of 2.35, probably a fairly conservative number on a bond anticipation note, because bond anticipation notes have a favorable percentage, much lower than a bond would at this point in time. Principal payment, $870,000, total $2.75 million is an estimate for the next year, 2021. The reason I put the estimates on there is to show that with this $400,000 piece falling off, this goes up almost $400,000, so it creates a level debt service or a budget neutral situation. And it begins to pay down on the $106 million. Now you might say 750, 870, not a really big amount in comparison to 106 million, but it all adds up. So those principal payments will reduce that total borrowing in the end, therefore lowering the total interest that'll be due on that bond when we get to that point of actually going to the bond market.
Scott, can you tell our board and our budget committee what you are allowed, how many years to work with bond anticipation notes?
So that could go out as much as 5 years. It doesn't mean that's what we will do, but you could go out that far before you need to go to market. And when we do go to market, we'll have a choice. We can go to what is the dorm authority, or we can just go to market on our own. The dorm authority is essentially a combination of all of the public borrowings that take place in the state, and they go to market at one point in time. The advantage to that is that when the building aid starts flowing, it matches the interest rate that you're paying on the bond. When you go to market, there's no guarantee of that match. So that's a decision to be made at that point in time based on market conditions. So just to summarize this, we got the 3 serial bonds outstanding. There's still a total of $10.3 million due in principal and interest on those 3 issues. Everything falls off when we get to 22-23. And as I've said, the debt service on the current project will begin this next year, 19-20. Any questions on the debt service piece before we advance?
Does the board have any questions for Scott? Our budget committee have any questions? You good?
Sorry. So just so I understand about the bond anticipation notice, that the 80 million is paying back the 53 million, and then whatever else we need for the construction project. That's why that adds up to more than what we started with.
Right, it's not 53 plus 80.
Okay.
Paying off
I didn't think so.
53
I
and
just wanted
taking
to
out 80.
confirm that.
Good question, though.
And then if you can go to the next slide was, so as we start making debt payments on that 106 million, whatever that is, does that impact our total budget in terms of the tax cap, or is that paid for outside of that?
It absolutely does. It is a factor in the tax cap formula. So you take your debt service at that time minus building aid to come up with a net figure, and that's what gets plugged into the tax cap formula.
And that's why you said that's the advantage to the dorm authority, is that we're not potentially losing any there.
It's not so much a tax cap advantage, it's an advantage in that you're going to be able to match your revenue with your expense more precisely once the building aid starts flowing.
Right.
And building aid doesn't start flowing until you get a point in time in the project when you get to substantial completion that you can then file final cost reports on each section of the project.
Thank you.
And there are parts of this project that are renovation, and that's a 15-year term, and parts of it that are new construction, and that's a 20-year term.
Scott, can I ask you a question? So back up to the debt service schedule. So just for budgetary impact, for 18-19, the budget year we're in right now, we've got 2.9 million in payment for debt service. The number right next to it for 19-20, it's about the same.
About the same.
About the same. And then in addition, we're gonna have another 2.3 million that has to be folded into this year's budget. So let me ask you about the 750 principal. Why would we pay 750 principal if we're rolling a $53 million ban into another $80 million ban? Why are we paying down principal on that?
Again, to reduce the ultimate bond amount when we get to that point. It is, in this particular year, it is an election. There are rules that require you to pay down bans. This 870 is a requirement. But there is an advantage to beginning to pay down the principal.
So it makes that ban, instead of being 53 million, it makes it 52,250? Because we've dropped it down, so then, but
Just using round numbers.
Yeah, I know you're using estimates, because we're gonna have to go out then and borrow that again, right? In another ban?
Correct.
Am I missing something? I mean, you're paying down principal and then you're borrowing it again in the following year.
Not really.
No? All right.
Because
Well,
you're gonna take that off of the principal amount, and you're only this is just a cash flow amount. It's not not trying to equate 53 minus 750 plus the amount we need for cash flow for that next year.
Okay. All right. I guess when we see the budget, how this fits into the budget, I'll really get comfortable with that. Okay. Thanks.
So the last section is in regard to interfund transfers, and there's two pieces to this, and they're completely unrelated. Transfer to capital and the amount not needed to fund, or the general fund to fund the special aid fund for summer special education. Completely unrelated. So the bottom piece is pretty straightforward. The general fund is obligated to pay 20% of the total costs of summer special ed services. The state funds the 80%. You may remember, some of you may remember from last year, that one of the governor's proposals was to kind of strip away that 80-20 split and cost shift it. That's not a proposal this year. So that's why it's reverted and remained at the 80-20 cost share formula. Transfer to capital, we've already talked a lot about the building condition survey upcoming in 2020, and that's what we will use to guide future capital work, whether it be through transfer to capital or whether it be through another larger bond issue.
And, I'd just like to comment on that. In the past, we started off probably for a few years after the annexation of Maplewood, allocating about $1 million a year to transfer to capital, and that was to knock off a few of the items on the BCS. We then increased that over a year or two for the past couple of years, I would say, to about $3 million to maybe $3.5 million. Many school districts, in fact, it is the typical practice of school districts throughout the area to take a look at running smaller bonds just to do transfer to capital. As we stated, when we went back and we looked at the original bond proposal and the second time around after the initial defeat in December 2016, we came back and the voters approved the $106 million. At that time, we took a considerable amount of work away from the high school. So there will have to be work done in the high school. We believe that our enhancements to that facility, seeing that was built in 1958, added on to in 1970 for the bulk of the building with addition off the back in 2003. It's an aging building. It needs an upgrade in terms of a program to meet the needs of educating students today. But in addition to that, there are mechanical problems with that building, as well as mechanical problems with buildings throughout the district. When I say problems, they're not severe, they're not dramatic, but they are buildings and they need upkeep. They need roofs. I think someone's alluded to the problem over Taft Cafeteria. We have a 30-year roof. So we have parking lots, we have HVAC, we have heating systems, we have cooling systems. We all have to look at these and we have to do the work needed to keep these functioning. So the way we may work on this in the future is to run to go and do bonding to do this work. And the reason why that is a shift is that the state, a number of years ago, shifted the way that they would compensate districts. Instead of, there was an advantage to perhaps doing it with cash. When, the work was completed, the aid started, all the aid started flowing immediately. Now the aid is substantially prorated over 15 years for renovation work or for building conditions work, or 20 years if we're doing new construction. So it's prorated, okay? So therefore you're not getting it back in the lump that you used to get it. So the advantage of not borrowing has been mitigated, and really the typical practice of our neighbors is to bond this work periodically. You may look and you may see in the paper, if you follow Shenandoah, Shenandoah every 3 or 4 years will typically run a $20 to $30 million bond. So we have that, plus we do have enhancements, and we have started the process to begin to look at that and to work on that, with the hope of running a new bond for the high school at some time over the next couple of years.
Are there any questions for Scott? Yes, Karen.
Scott, just as a gut reaction from you for bonding with the dormitory authority versus going out, what are your contemporaries around the state doing and why, if you have any sense?
I don't know what the numbers are, but like I indicated, there is an advantage to doing that in that you don't have to worry about whether the interest rate that's imputed by the state is going to be the same as what you can go to market. If you got a good rating, maybe you can go to market and you can do better than what the state rate might be. The disadvantage to DASNY is the upfront costs are greater.
That's what I was going to ask you about, the costs.
The closing costs are greater through the dorm authority.
Okay.
So there's a trade-off between that and the guarantee of having the rates match up between aid and your interest expense.
Do you know are there other school districts around going out for bonds, and what are they doing?
I remember off the top of my head that DASNY, when they went out in June, I believe it was the largest issue that they'd ever gone out with, so that's probably indicative of the number of schools that are going to market and just the amount of construction that's currently going on.
Thank you.
So is it possible that the dormitory authority's rate could be higher than a rate that we would get, but when we get reimbursed from the state, would they reimburse us at the dormitory rate, so we would then be getting additional aid on top? We would be making out on the deal, basically. Is that a possibility?
It's possible, but that's where the art and science of the fiscal advisors come in when we get closer to that time, and they're experts in that area, and they help guide districts to make the best decision.
Right. Thanks.
We have a fairly strong bond rating, don't we, as a school district?
It's up there tied with the highest in the area.
So using the dormitory authority, could be school districts whose bond ratings perhaps aren't as good. Perhaps.
And we, it's too early to tell, but there's also, as we talked about last week, the governor's proposals do contain some changes to building aid. So we'll have to see how that washes out, and that could influence decisions down the road.
Asked about so this year, you're not proposing any transfer to capital, and that's different than because I think last year was pretty big, right? It was like-
Actually, last year it was scaled down. The year before that, it was about 3.45. Last year's 1.17.
Right. And the reason for that is that it's cheaper for us to get like any capital work we'd be doing is cheaper to roll it into the bonds. Is that how that works?
I think it's fair to say there's some efficiencies to be gained, but also I think it's also fair to say the district's done a nice job over the past X number of years with doing these small-ish projects to keep the facilities in good order. And the staff, as we've talked about, have the capacity and the skills to maintain systems. But given the large project that's ongoing, we've got the balance of 17-18 to do this summer. We've got the 18-19 allocation from last year to also do this summer. So we've got plenty to take care of, both with the large project and with the two versions of the transfer work. Then we'll get into the 2020 building conditions survey, and that'll kind of set the table for the next round, whether it be more transfer work, a bond, or a combination.
And does eliminating that transfer to capital help to create a cushion so that the bands on the balance sheet kind of work out?
It does help to set the stage for kind of creating that level or somewhat level debt service going forward. Did you want to?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead. So just the 14th is not on there, so you might mention it again.
So on Thursday night, which Thursday's not up here, but Thursday the 14th, I mentioned previously, we have our SRO presentation, and that will take place in this room here at 7 o'clock. Next Monday, we are going to be doing instructional technology equipment, and an update on the Smart Schools Bond Act. Then we go to Monday, April 1, 7 p.m. That's staffing, building enrollment, new programs and initiative. And then on the 8th, we hope to wrap up with proposed budget, updated tax cap, property tax report card, and so on. And then the board would formally adopt the budget at the monthly meeting on the 17th of April. Also, you can see Monday, April 1, around that time, that is the time where we hope to have a state budget. So that would give us a better understanding of what our revenue would be. Thank you very much.
Joe, at the last week's meeting, you mentioned that you would get us some information about writing to our state.
And I apologize.
And is that something?
Thank you for reminding me, because that totally slipped my mind.
Because I'll be honest with you, I've never done it before, but some of the things you talked to us about last week really upset me.
I will do that, Karen. In fact, maybe what I can do is, we have everybody's email address. I can get that out to.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank John and Brian and Scott, thank you, and Mr. Core, thank you, and thank you to Mrs. Nordalillo and Mr. Rondell, our budget co-chairs. I'll take a motion to return to special session and adjourn. Mr. Gaynor, and a second, Mrs. Pangburn, and all in favor? Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.